The skies over New York City turned dark, not because of storm clouds or an approaching night, but because something massive was blocking the sun. People stopped in their tracks, craning their necks upward as a huge alien ship descended silently from the heavens. It shimmered like liquid metal, its surface reflecting the city's lights and buildings below. The air felt heavy, charged with anticipation, as if the entire world was holding its breath. No explosions rocked the ground. No beams of light shot out to destroy landmarks. Instead, the enormous vessel settled gently into Central Park, flattening trees and grass beneath it without so much as a sound. The crowd that had gathered around the park's edges stared in awe, some snapping photos, others clutching their phones tightly, unsure whether to feel excited or terrified. Among them stood John Miller, a retired Marine-turned-journalist, his eyes fixed on the ship. Beside him was Lavra Bennett, a sharp analyst who worked for a global security think tank. Both were there to witness history, though neither could have predicted what came next. After several tense minutes, a section of the ship slid open, revealing a group of tall, slender beings stepping onto Earth for the first time. Their translucent skin glowed faintly under the sunlight, and their elongated limbs moved with unnatural grace. They called themselves the Valens, emissaries from a distant galaxy who claimed to come in peace. Through a translator device operated by one of their number, they addressed humanity. "We are here to share knowledge, to help you grow." The announcement sent ripples across the globe. Within hours, news networks broadcast the event worldwide. Governments scrambled to respond, calling emergency meetings while citizens debated whether this was a miracle or a trap. For days, the Valens remained aboard their ship, sending out messages through intermediaries humans fluent in languages they had somehow mastered almost instantly. These intermediaries explained that the Valens wished to teach humanity advanced military doctrines, strategies designed to minimize casualties and maximize efficiency in conflict. At first, skepticism reigned supreme. Why would an advanced alien species offer such valuable information freely? What did they want in return? But as weeks passed, the Valens proved genuine. They shared intricate plans for defensive systems, psychological tactics, and energy-efficient weapons that rendered traditional arsenals obsolete. Nations began adopting these methods cautiously at first, then more enthusiastically as results poured in. Conflicts that once seemed unsolvable resolved quickly, thanks to the Valens' guidance. Wars ended faster with fewer lives lost. Peace. Treaties were signed where none had been possible before. John watched all of this unfold with growing unease. He admired the progress, the way countries worked together, instead of tearing each other apart, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As a former Marine, he understood war better than most. War was messy, brutal, and unpredictable. Yet everything the Valens offered seemed too perfect, too clean. It didn't sit well with him. Lavra shared his concerns, though she tried to keep an open mind. She attended countless briefings alongside government officials, analyzing every piece of information the Valens provided. Her sharp eye caught subtle patterns in their teachings, hints of manipulation buried beneath layers of goodwill. Still, she hesitated to voice her doubts publicly. Who would believe her? Everyone else saw only the benefits, the wars avoided, the lives saved. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Lavra joined John at a quiet cafe near Central Park. They sat outside, sipping coffee as the setting sun cast long shadows across the table. "It's working," Lavra said finally, breaking the silence. "Their methods are effective. Too effective." "That's what worries me," John replied, leaning forward. "Nothing works this smoothly unless someone planned it that way, and we still don't know why they're doing this." Lavra nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that too. Every doctrine they give us has a purpose, sure, but I can't figure out what they're getting out of it. There's no trade-off, no demand for resources or territory. It doesn't make sense." John frowned, tapping his fingers against the side of his cup. "Maybe they're waiting for something. Maybe they're testing us." "Testing us for what?" Lavra asked, raising an eyebrow. "I don't know," John admitted. "But whatever it is, I doubt we'll like the answer." As the days turned, Into weeks, John's suspicions deepened. He spent hours poring over reports, searching for clues that might explain the Valen's true motives. One night, while reviewing classified documents in his cramped apartment, he stumbled upon something unusual, a series of encrypted transmissions between the Valens and an unknown recipient. At first glance, the messages appeared harmless. Routine even. But when John ran them through a decryption program, fragments of text emerged that hinted at something far more sinister. "They're studying us," he muttered to himself, staring at the screen. His heart raced as realization dawned. The Valens weren't just teaching, they were observing, collecting data on how humanity responded to their doctrines. Every decision made, every strategy implemented fed into their research. And if John was right, the implications were staggering. The next morning, John met Lavra at her office, a sterile room filled with stacks of papers and glowing computer monitors. He handed her a printout of the decrypted messages, explaining what he'd found. Lavra listened intently, her expression growing darker with each passing moment. "This changes everything," she said quietly, setting the papers down. "If they're using us as lab rats, then nothing they've done is altruistic. It's all part of some bigger plan." "But what's the endgame?" John asked, pacing back and forth. "What do they gain from turning us into their test subjects?" Lavra shook her head. "I don't know. But we need to find out before it's too late." Together they decided to dig deeper. Using their connections within the military and intelligence communities, they gathered more evidence, piecing together fragments of information that painted a troubling picture. The Valen's presence wasn't a gift, it was an experiment, and humanity was the unwitting participant. Despite their efforts, convincing others of the truth proved difficult. Most people were too enamored with the peace and prosperity the Valens brought to listen to warnings of hidden agendas. Even those in power dismissed John and Laura's findings as conspiracy theories, unwilling to risk destabilizing the fragile harmony that had taken root, but John refused to give up. If the Valens had a secret agenda, he intended to uncover it, because deep down he knew one thing for certain: nothing truly came without a price. Not even salvation from the stars. The world had changed. Under the guidance of the Valens, humanity embraced a new way of thinking about conflict. Gone were the days of brute force and endless wars fought with tanks, planes, and guns. Instead, nations adopted strategies rooted in precision, psychology, and efficiency. Soldiers trained to incapacitate rather than kill, using tools designed to subdue enemies without causing permanent harm. Energy-efficient defense grids replaced outdated missile systems, and psychological tactics became the cornerstone of military operations. Lavra Bennett found herself at the center of this transformation. As one of the key figures interpreting the Valens' teachings, she worked closely with high-ranking officials like General Matthew Hayes and Dr. Patricia Wong, a leading xenolinguist who served as the primary translator for the aliens. Together, they analyzed every doctrine the Valens shared, ensuring it was implemented correctly across the globe. Laura's sharp mind and analytical skills earned her respect within diplomatic circles, but privately she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. John Miller, on the other hand, remained an outsider. Though his journalistic background gave him access to classified information, he lacked the authority to influence decisions directly. Still, he used his position to observe, document, and question everything. He attended briefings, interviewed soldiers who had undergone the new training programs, and spoke with civilians whose lives had been affected by the changes. What he saw troubled him deeply. At first glance, the Valens' methods appeared flawless. Conflicts that once dragged on for years ended in mere weeks. Nations that had spent decades locked in bitter rivalries signed treaties almost overnight. The global economy stabilized as resources once devoted to war were redirected toward rebuilding and innovation. It seemed like a utopia, a future humanity had only dreamed of. But John noticed cracks forming beneath the surface. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Lavra invited John to her office. She had spent hours poring over reports detailing the implementation of the Valens' doctrines, searching for inconsistencies or hidden agendas. Her desk was cluttered with papers, maps, and notes scrawled in hurried handwriting. I think I've found something, she said, gesturing for him to sit down. What is it? John asked, leaning forward. Lavra handed him a document filled with data points and diagrams. Look at this! Every time we adopt one of their strategies, there's a corresponding shift in power dynamics. Smaller nations lose influence while larger ones consolidate control? John studied the charts carefully. You're saying the Valens are manipulating us? Making sure no single country becomes too dominant? Exactly, Lavra replied, her voice tense. It's subtle, but it's there. Their doctrines aren't just about ending wars, they're about maintaining balance. A balance they control, John frowned. That doesn't sound like altruism, more like puppeteering, Lavra nodded grimly. And it gets worse. Remember those encrypted transmissions you found? I cross-referenced them with recent events, and it looks like the Valens are tweaking their doctrines based on how we respond. They're learning from us, adapting their strategies to keep us dependent on them. John stood up abruptly, pacing the room. So they're not just teaching, they're experimenting, using us as guinea pigs to test their theories. Exactly, Lavra said again, her tone heavy with frustration. But try telling that to anyone else. Everyone's so caught up in the results, the peace, the prosperity, that they don't see the bigger picture. John sighed, rubbing his temples. We need proof. Something concrete that'll make people listen. Over the next few weeks, John and Lavra worked tirelessly to gather evidence. They combed through classified files, interviewed soldiers and civilians, and analyzed patterns in international relations. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge. The Valens weren't just sharing knowledge, they were shaping humanity's future according to their own design. And the more dependent Earth became on their doctrines, the harder it would be to break free. Their investigation took a dramatic turn when Lavra uncovered a series of directives buried within the Valens' teachings. At first glance, these directives seemed innocuous, encouraging cooperation and unity among nations. But upon closer inspection, Lavra realized they subtly favored centralized authority, ensuring no single leader or government could challenge the status quo. It was a clever form of manipulation, one that most people wouldn't notice until it was too late. This is bad, Lavra muttered, showing the documents to John. Really bad. If we follow these directives fully, we'll lose any chance of independence. We'll become puppets, plain and simple. John clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. We have to expose this, now. But exposing the truth wasn't easy. When Lavra presented her findings to General Hayes, he dismissed her concerns, calling them unfounded speculation. The Valens have given us peace, he said firmly. We can't risk jeopardizing that by spreading fear and paranoia. Doctor? Patricia Wong was equally dismissive. You're misinterpreting their intentions, she insisted. Everything they've done has been for our benefit. Trust me, I've spoken with Kale directly. He wants to help us. Kale was the leader of the Valens, a towering figure who rarely interacted with humans directly. Instead, he communicated exclusively through Dr. Wong, delivering messages that were calm, measured, and always reassuring. To many, Kale represented hope, a benevolent guide steering humanity toward a brighter future. But to John and Lavra, he was a mystery, a shadowy figure whose true motives remained hidden. Determined to uncover the truth, John decided to take matters into his own hands. Using his connections within the military, he arranged a visit to the Valens' ship. Officially, the trip was part of a routine inspection tour, meant to showcase the aliens' advanced technology and reinforce trust between species. Unofficially, John planned to look for answers that might confirm his worst fears. On the day of the tour, John joined a small group of delegates, including Lavra, General Hayes, and several other high-ranking officials. As they boarded the ship, John felt a mixture of awe and unease. The interior was sleek and sterile, with smooth walls that seemed to pulse faintly with light. Strange symbols were etched into the surfaces, glowing softly as if alive. The air smelled metallic, tinged with an unfamiliar scent that made John's skin crawl. Kale greeted the group personally, his towering frame dwarfing even the tallest humans. His translucent skin shimmered under the ship's artificial lights, and his eyes, large, black, and unreadable, seemed to pierce straight through them. Through Dr. Wong, Kale welcomed them warmly, offering to answer any questions they might have. General Hayes stepped forward, asking about the Valen's ultimate goals. "Why do you share your knowledge with us?" he asked. "What do you hope to achieve?" Kale paused, tilting his head slightly as if considering the question. Then, through Dr. Wong, he replied, "We seek to elevate your species, to guide you toward a future free of unnecessary suffering." John exchanged a glance with LeVar. The response was vague, evasive. It told them nothing they didn't already know. But before anyone could press further, Kale continued, "However, your progress depends on trust. Without trust, all efforts will fail." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Was Kale warning them? Or simply reminding them of their dependence on the Valens? As the tour progressed, John kept his eyes peeled for anything unusual. He snapped photos of the strange symbols etched into the walls, hoping someone might decipher their meaning later. He also paid close attention to the Valens themselves, noting how they observed the humans with detached curiosity. As if studying lab rats in a maze. By the time the group returned to Earth, John was certain of one thing: the Valens weren't just teachers. They were observers, analysts, perhaps even manipulators. Whatever their ultimate goal, it wasn't purely altruistic. And unless humanity woke up to the truth, they risked becoming pawns in a game they didn't fully understand. Back on solid ground, John and Lavra compared notes, piecing together what they had learned. The symbols John photographed proved difficult to decode, but Lavra suspected they contained vital information, perhaps even instructions or codes embedded within the Valens technology. Meanwhile, the directives LeVar had uncovered painted a chilling picture of a future where humanity's autonomy was stripped away, replaced by dependency on alien guidance. "We can't let this continue," John said firmly, slamming his fist on the table. "If we don't act now, it'll be too late." Lavra nodded, her expression resolute. "Agreed, but how do we convince everyone else? They're too blinded by the results to see the danger." John thought for a moment, then smiled grimly. "Maybe we don't need to convince everyone. Maybe we just need to ask the right question." "What do you mean?" Lavra asked, frowning. "I mean," John replied, leaning back in his chair, "we need to make the Valens explain themselves. Force them to reveal their true motives. Because if they're hiding something, they'll slip up eventually." Lavra considered this, then nodded slowly. "All right, let's do it. But we'll need a plan and allies we can trust." As they began plotting their next move, neither of them realized just how far-reaching the consequences would be. The Valens had taught humanity many things, but now it was humanity's turn to pose a question, one that would change everything. The cracks in the Valens' perfect facade began to widen. At first it was small things, whispers of dissent, murmurs of unease. A group of rogue militants, calling themselves the Free Earth Alliance, refused to adopt the Valens' doctrines. They viewed the aliens' teachings as a form of control, a way to strip humanity of its independence. To them, the new strategies and technologies weren't tools for peace, they were chains disguised as gifts. The Free Earth Alliance launched a series of attacks on facilities implementing the Valens systems. Power grids went dark. Defense hubs were sabotaged. Though their numbers were small, their actions sent shockwaves through governments worldwide. For the first time since the Valens' arrival, people began questioning whether the aliens' presence was truly beneficial, or if it marked the beginning of humanity's downfall. Lavra Bennett watched these events unfold with growing concern. She had spent weeks gathering evidence of the Valens' subtle manipulations, but now she faced a new challenge, convincing others to take her findings seriously. The attacks by the Free Earth Alliance only complicated matters. Many dismissed the group as extremists, ignoring their warnings as the desperate cries of radicals unwilling to embrace progress. But Lavra saw something deeper, a reflection of her own doubts, amplified by fear and anger. John Miller shared her frustration. Despite their efforts, neither of them could penetrate the wall of trust surrounding the Valens. Leaders clung to the belief that the aliens' intentions were pure. unwilling to entertain the possibility of hidden agendas. Even General Matthew Hayes, who had once been open to hearing their concerns, now brushed them aside. "We can't afford to destabilize what we've built," he told Lavra during one heated meeting. "The risks are too great." But John wasn't ready to give up. He knew the truth was out there, buried beneath layers of carefully crafted lies, and he was determined to uncover it no matter the cost. One evening, after another fruitless attempt to sway officials, Lavra and John met at a quiet diner near Central Park. The neon sign outside flickered faintly, casting an eerie glow over their table. Lavra pushed a stack of papers toward John, her hands trembling slightly. "I think I've found something big," she said, her voice low. "Something that might finally make people listen?" John raised an eyebrow, picking up the documents. "What is it?" "It's about the Valence technology," Lavra explained. "Every system they've given us, every weapon, every grid, every tactic is designed to integrate seamlessly with their own tech. If we rely on it completely, we won't just be dependent on their knowledge, we'll be dependent on them." John scanned the pages, his expression darkening. "You're saying they've built a back door into everything?" "Exactly," Lavra replied. "If they wanted to, they could shut us down any time. Turn off our defenses, disable our weapons, leave U.S. helpless." John leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. "That's not teaching, it's control, pure and simple," Lavra nodded grimly. "And it gets worse. Look at this." She slid another document across the table. It detailed patterns in global decision-making, showing how the Valence Doctrine subtly favored centralized authority. Smaller nations lost influence while larger ones consolidated power. Conflicts ended quickly, but at the expense of regional autonomy. "They're reshaping the world order," John muttered, shaking his head, "creating a system where no one can challenge them." Lavra leaned forward, her eyes intense. "We need to expose this, not just to officials, but to the public. If people realize how much control they're giving up, they'll demand answers." John hesitated, rubbing his temples. "Easier said than done. The Valens have everyone convinced. They're saviors. How do we break through that?" Lavra thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. "We ask the right question. One they can't ignore." "What kind of question?" John asked. "One that forces them to explain themselves. Something so fundamental, so obvious, that avoiding it would raise suspicions." John considered this, then nodded slowly. "All right. Let's do it, but we'll need help in timing." Over the next few days, John and Lavra worked tirelessly to prepare. They reached out to trusted allies within the military and intelligence communities, sharing their findings and outlining their plan. Some were hesitant, fearing the consequences of challenging the Valens. Others agreed to support them quietly, recognizing the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, tensions between humanity and the Valens continued to rise. The Free Earth Alliance grew bolder, launching more attacks despite heavy losses. Governments responded with swift crackdowns, labeling the group as terrorist. Public opinion remained divided, with some siding with the militants and others condemning their actions. Amid the chaos, Kale, the Valens leader, summoned Earth's leaders to an emergency meeting aboard their ship when the delegation arrived. Including John, Lavra, General Hayes, and Dr. Patricia Wong. Kale greeted them with his usual calm demeanor. Through Dr. Wong, he addressed the recent unrest, denying any malicious intent. "Your species has made remarkable progress," he said. "But discord threatens to undo it. Unity is essential." General Hayes nodded, visibly relieved by Kale's reassurance. "We understand your concerns. Rest assured, we're taking steps to address the situation." John exchanged a glance with Lavra. This was their chance. As the discussion continued, Lavra stepped forward, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to say. "Kale, you've taught us many things. Strategies, technologies, ways to resolve conflicts. But there's one thing you haven't explained. What do you gain from all this?" The room fell silent. Kale tilted his head slightly, his large black eyes fixed on Lavra. Through Dr. Wang, he replied, "Our goal is altruistic. We seek to elevate your species, Lavar pressed on, undeterred. If your goal is truly altruistic, why do you avoid answering questions about yourselves? Why do you refuse direct interaction with anyone except Dr. Wong? What do you gain from this exchange? For the first time, Kale hesitated. His expression shifted imperceptibly, a flicker of uncertainty, crossing his otherwise stoic features. After a long pause, he admitted, "Our species faces extinction. We cannot adapt to conflict as you do. By studying your capacity for war and cooperation, we hope to save ourselves." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Murmurs rippled through the room as delegates processed Kale's words. Humanity's role in the Valen's experiment became painfully clear. They weren't students, they were subjects, guinea pigs in a desperate bid for survival, but Kale wasn't finished. "However," he continued, "adopting our doctrines fully will render you dependent on our technology. Without us, your systems will fail. This is not coercion, it is a consequence of your choices." John clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. "So you're saying we trade our independence for survival? Is that it?" Kale's gaze shifted to John, unreadable yet piercing. "Survival often requires compromise. You must decide what price you are willing to pay." The meeting ended shortly afterward, leaving the delegation stunned. On the journey back to Earth, silence filled the shuttle as each person grappled with Kale's admission. For General Hayes and Dr. Wong, it was a sobering reminder of the stakes involved. For John and Lavar, it was validation of their worst fears and a call to action back on Earth. News of the Valen's true motives spread rapidly. Governments convened emergency sessions, debating whether to sever ties or continue working with the aliens. Public opinion fractured further, with protests erupting in cities worldwide. Some demanded immediate independence from Valen influence, while others argued that rejecting their doctrines would plunge humanity back into chaos. Amid the turmoil, John and Laval focused on finding solutions. They collaborated with scientists and engineers to reverse engineer Valen technology, hoping to create alternatives that didn't rely on alien systems. Mistakes were made, setbacks inevitable, but progress came steadily. Slowly, humanity began reclaiming its autonomy. As the Valens withdrew their ambassadors, retreating to their ship, Kale delivered a final message. "You have proven capable of questioning authority, a trait rare among species we've encountered. Perhaps your future lies not in following our path, but forging your own." With the Valens gone, humanity faced the daunting task of rebuilding. Wars flared up again. Old rivalries resurfaced, but so did innovation and resilience. Under the leadership of individuals like John and Lavra, Earth began charting a course guided not by alien doctrines but by human ingenuity. Years later, as John gazed at the stars from his porch, he reflected on the lessons learned, not just from the Valens but from humanity's response to their presence. Somewhere out there, the Valens continued their search for answers. But for now, Earth had found its own. The departure of the Valens left a void that humanity struggled to fill. Without their guidance, the world teetered on the edge of chaos. The systems they had introduced, energy-efficient grids, non-lethal weaponry, and psychological tactics, began to falter. Nations scrambled to adapt, but the cracks in the foundation grew wider with each passing day. Conflicts that had been resolved quickly under the Valens doctrines reignited. Fueled by mistrust and competition for resources, John Miller and Lavra Bennett found themselves at the forefront of humanity's efforts to rebuild. They worked tirelessly alongside scientists, engineers, and military strategists to reverse engineer the alien technology and create alternatives that didn't rely on Valen systems. It was a monumental task, fraught with challenges and setbacks. Every breakthrough came at a cost. Every failure a reminder of how deeply humanity had depended on its extraterrestrial mentors. In the early days after the Valens' departure, panic spread like wildfire. Power grids failed in major cities, leaving millions without electricity. Defense networks collapsed, exposing borders to potential threats. Governments convened emergency summits, desperate to find solutions before the situation spiraled out of control. General Matthew Hayes, once a staunch supporter of the Valens, now led the charge to stabilize global security. He called on John and Lavra to assist, recognizing their unique understanding of the aliens' methods. "We're flying blind here," Hayes admitted during one meeting, his voice heavy with frustration. "Everything we've built is falling apart. If we don't act fast, it'll be a free-for-all." Lavra nodded grimly. "We need to prioritize. Focus on critical infrastructure first: power, water, communications. Then we can tackle defense and diplomacy." John added, "And we need transparency. People are scared because they don't know what's happening. If we keep them informed, they'll be more likely to cooperate." Hayes agreed, ordering his teams to implement their recommendations immediately. Over the next few weeks, engineers worked around the clock to repair damaged systems and develop new ones. Scientists pored over blueprints and schematics, trying to replicate the Valens' innovations without relying on their technology. Progress was slow, but steady. Meanwhile, public sentiment shifted dramatically. At first, many mourned the loss of the peace and prosperity the Valens had brought. But as the truth about their motives spread, anger replaced gratitude. Protests erupted in cities worldwide, demanding accountability from leaders who had trusted the aliens so blindly. Some groups called for complete isolation from extraterrestrial contact, while others advocated for renewed efforts to explore space and seek allies beyond Earth. Amid the turmoil, John and Lavara became symbols of hope. Their relentless pursuit of independence inspired countless others to join the cause. Volunteers poured into research facilities, offering their skills and labor to accelerate progress. Communities banded together to share resources and support one another through the transition. For the first time in years, humanity felt united not by an external force, but by a shared determination to shape its own destiny. However, not everyone embraced this newfound spirit of resilience. Rogue factions, emboldened by the collapse of centralized authority, seized opportunities to expand their influence. The Free Earth Alliance, once dismissed as extremists, gained traction as more people questioned whether reliance on alien doctrines had weakened humanity's ability to govern itself. Their attacks grew bolder, targeting key installations and disrupting recovery efforts. One night, as John reviewed reports of recent skirmishes, he received an urgent call from Lavra. Her voice was tense, bordering on frantic. "We have a problem," she said. "The Alliance just hit a research facility outside Chicago. They destroyed months of work and worse, they took hostages." John's stomach churned. "How many?" "5 scientists. All experts in energy systems." "This isn't random," John muttered, pacing the room. "They're sending a message," Lover agreed. "They want us to know they're serious, and they're exploiting the chaos to push their agenda." Hayes convened an emergency meeting the next morning, bringing together military leaders, intelligence officers, and civilian advisors. The mood was somber, tinged with urgency. "We can't let them get away with this," Hayes declared. "If we show weakness now, it'll embolden others to follow suit." John stepped forward, addressing the group. "We need to take back control not just militarily, but strategically. Show the world we're capable of handling this without the Valens," Lavra elaborated, pointing to a map of the region. "The facility they attacked is close to Lake Michigan. If they cut off access to fresh water, they could cripple the entire area. We need to stop them before they escalate further." The plan was risky but necessary. A joint task force, composed of soldiers trained in both traditional and Valen methods, launched a coordinated assault on the Alliance's stronghold. Using improvised technology and unconventional tactics, they managed to breach the compound and rescue the hostages. Though casualties were high, the mission succeeded in dismantling the faction's leadership and halting their operations temporarily. The victory provided a much-needed morale boost, but John and Lavra knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The underlying issues, distrust, inequality, and fear remained unresolved. As long as these problems persisted, humanity would remain vulnerable to exploitation, whether by rogue groups or future alien visitors, determined to address the root causes. John and Lavra spearheaded initiatives aimed at fostering collaboration and transparency. They organized forums where scientists, politicians, and ordinary citizens could come together to discuss challenges and propose solutions. They encouraged open dialogue, emphasizing the importance of learning from past mistakes rather than repeating them. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Lavra joined John on the rooftop of their headquarters. The city lights stretched out before them, a testament to humanity's resilience despite the odds. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. John hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I don't know. But I do know one thing: we're trying. That's more than we've done in a long time." Lavra nodded, gazing at the horizon. "Maybe that's enough. For now." As weeks turned into months, humanity continued to rebuild. New alliances formed, driven by mutual interests rather than imposed order. Technologies developed independently. A Valen influence began to emerge, showcasing human creativity and ingenuity. Mistakes were made, old rivalries flared up, but so did innovation and cooperation. Through it all, John and Lavra remained steadfast, guiding humanity toward a future shaped not by alien doctrines but by its own aspirations. They understood that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles and sacrifices. But they also knew that true progress came not from following someone else's path, but from forging your own. Years later, as John stood on the same rooftop where he and Lavra had shared their quiet moment of reflection, he looked out at the world below. The scars of the past were still visible, etched into the landscape and the collective memory of humanity. But so were the signs of renewal: new buildings rising from ruins, communities thriving despite adversity, and dreams taking flight once again. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, the Valens continued their journey, searching for answers to questions humanity might never fully understand. But for now, Earth had found its own. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: humanity had taken its first steps toward defining itself, not as subjects of an experiment, but as masters of its own fate. Years had passed since the Valens departed, leaving humanity to chart its own course. The scars of their influence lingered: crumbling infrastructure, fractured alliances, and lingering fears, but so did the lessons learned. Humanity had stumbled, faltered, and nearly fallen apart, but it had also risen stronger, more determined than ever to forge its own path. John Miller and Lavra Bennett stood side by side on a hill overlooking Central Park, where the alien ship had once landed. The park had been restored, its trees replanted, and its grass regrown, but the memory of that day remained etched into the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. John sighed, his hands in his pockets as he gazed at the city skyline. "It's strange," he said finally. "I used to think we were better off without them, but now I wonder." Lavra tilted her head, studying him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, they taught us things we never would have figured out on our own, things that saved lives. Does it matter if their motives weren't pure? Maybe the end result is what counts." Lavra frowned, shaking her head. "Motives always matter. John, if we don't understand why they did what they did, how can we trust anything they gave us?" John shrugged, conceding her point. "Fair enough, but look around. We're still standing. That has to count for something." And they were. Despite the challenges, humanity had rebuilt. New technologies emerged, developed independently of Valen influence. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to create systems that didn't rely on alien designs, ensuring Earth's future wouldn't hinge on extraterrestrial intervention. Governments collaborated more openly, sharing resources and knowledge to prevent another collapse. Even the Free Earth Alliance, once a symbol of resistance, dissolved after its leaders were captured or killed. Their message absorbed into broader discussions about autonomy and cooperation, but progress wasn't perfect. Old rivalries resurfaced, sparking conflicts that tested humanity's newfound resolve. Some nations clung to remnants of the Valens doctrines, unwilling to abandon strategies that had brought peace before. Others rejected them entirely, experimenting with untested methods that sometimes led to disaster. Mistakes were made. Lives were lost. But each failure became a stepping stone toward understanding. One of the biggest breakthroughs came from an unlikely source, Dr. Patricia Wong, once the primary translator for the Valens. She had faced intense scrutiny after their departure. Many accused her of being complicit in their manipulations, while others defended her as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Isolated and ostracized, Patricia retreated from public life, dedicating herself to studying the symbols John had photographed aboard the Valens ship. Her research yielded surprising results. The symbols, initially thought to be decorative, turned out to be a complex coding system embedded within the aliens' technology. By deciphering them, Patricia uncovered hidden mechanisms that allowed humans to modify and adapt Valens systems without relying on external input. It was a game changer, enabling Earth to retain the benefits of alien innovation while asserting full control over its destiny. When Patricia presented her findings at a global summit, the room erupted in applause. For the first time in years, hope replaced fear. Leaders embraced her work, integrating it into recovery efforts worldwide. John and Laval watched proudly as their former colleague redeemed herself, proving that even those tainted by association could contribute to humanity's renewal. As stability returned, John and Laval shifted their focus to education. They believed the key to preventing future crises lay in teaching younger generations about the dangers of blind trust and the importance of questioning authority. Together, they founded an institute dedicated to studying alien encounters and fostering critical thinking. Students flocked to learn from them, eager to understand the lessons of the past and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. One evening, after a long day of lectures, John and Lavra sat together in the Institute's library, surrounded by books and papers. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. "Do you ever wonder what the Valens are doing now?" Lavra asked suddenly, breaking the silence. John chuckled. "All the time. Do you think they're watching us? Waiting to see if we screw up again?" "Maybe," Lavra replied thoughtfully. "Or maybe they've moved on to someone else. Another species they can help." John leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "If they are, I hope whoever they find is smarter than we were," Lavra smiled faintly. "We weren't stupid, John. Just trusting. Too willing to believe in miracles." "Yeah," John agreed. "But we learned. That's what matters." Their conversation drifted to memories of the early days, the confusion, the fear, the anger. They talked about Kale, the enigmatic leader whose admission of the Valens' true motives had changed everything. "Do you think he meant what he said?" Lavra asked. "About wanting to save themselves?" "Probably," John replied. "But it doesn't excuse what they did, using us like lab rats." "It's not right." "No," Lavra agreed. "But maybe it's not entirely their fault either. Survival instinct is a powerful thing." John nodded slowly. "Still, it makes you wonder, are we any different? Would we do the same if the roles were reversed?" Lavra hesitated, unsure how to answer. The question hung in the air, unanswered but impossible to ignore. The next morning, news broke of an unexpected discovery. Astronomers detected unusual signals emanating from deep space patterns, eerily similar to the symbols Patricia had deciphered. Speculation ran wild. Was it the Valens? Or another species altogether? Governments convened emergency meetings, debating how to respond. Some advocated for caution, warning against repeating past mistakes. Others argued for proactive engagement, citing the potential benefits of contact. Amid the chaos, John and Lavra were called upon to offer their insights. Standing before a packed auditorium, John addressed the crowd. "This isn't just about science or politics. It's about trust, knowing when to embrace opportunity and when to step back. We've been here before. Let's not make the same errors twice." Lavra followed, her voice steady and clear. "Whatever. These signals mean they're a reminder that we're not alone in the universe. But we're also not helpless. We have the tools, the knowledge, and the resilience to face whatever comes next. The question is, will we use them wisely?" Their words resonated deeply, calming fears and inspiring action. Teams of scientists and diplomats prepared to investigate the signals, armed with lessons learned from humanity's encounter with the Valens. This time, they vowed to approach with caution, transparency, and unity. Months later, as the investigation unfolded, John and Lavera stood once again on the hill overlooking Central Park. The city buzzed with renewed energy, its people united by curiosity and determination rather than fear. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" Lavra asked, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "The Valens?" John replied. "Maybe, or maybe it'll be someone else. Either way, we're ready." Lavra smiled, leaning against him. "Ready or not, here we go." As the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across the park, John and Lavra felt a sense of peace they hadn't known in years. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But one thing was clear: humanity had taken its first steps toward defining itself not as subjects of an experiment, but as architects of its own destiny. Somewhere out there, among the stars, the Valens continued their journey, searching for answers to questions humanity might never fully understand. But for now, Earth had found its own. And though the future remained unwritten, one truth shone brightly: humanity had proven capable of questioning, adapting, and enduring. Whatever came next, it would meet it head-on with courage, ingenuity, and an unshakable belief in its ability to shape its own fate.